Okay, well, thank you all for joining today's session on using 1099s in SAP Business One. I am Maggie Fernandez, your host for today. I will be going through a little bit about Phoenix and then get into today's topic. Okay, so a little bit about us. This is our leadership team on the Business One team. We've got David Schneider, our practice director, myself as director of customer success, Brandon Bellarnu, VP of sales and marketing, and Dustin, sales executive, that's on the call today with us. So a little bit about Phoenix. We're located, we've been around for over 25 years. We do 100% SAP Business One solutions. SAP solutions, not just Business One. And we have over 200 employees across the globe, 4 main offices. We're in 7 countries. And we have over 250 references. We're headquartered in Sarasota, Florida. We have offices also in Toronto and consultants across the US. Here are a list of SAP products that we sell, service, and we build solutions with for integrations and things like that for e-commerce or other platforms, operations that all connect to these SAP products. For today's session, we're focused on 1099s for the SAP Business One ERP solution. And here's a list of some of our IP solutions that we have for SAP Business One. We have an expense management app, the signature solution for within SAP Business One to send DocuSign transactions through there. We've got credit card, intercompany solution, e-commerce integrations to many different e-commerce platforms. We have a shipping solution where you can rate shop right within SAP Business One and also generate tracking and labels right out of SAP Business One for all your major partial shippers like UPS and FedEx. And we also have invoice integration. We've also partnered with an AI solution for SAP Business One. So if you're interested in any of these, please reach out to our sales team. Contact information is at the end of this presentation. Okay. So a little bit about an overview of our company. I already mentioned we have 25 years of service with SAP, working as a partner of SAP, selling and servicing a lot of their solutions or all of their solutions. We are, here's a list of all of the solutions, and we have functional and technical expertise in managing all the products. All right, so a little housekeeping before we get into today's webinar. Just be mindful, you're going to get a link after today's presentation with a copy of the PowerPoint. You're also going to get a link to the presentation itself, the recording, so you could always refer back to it. You can put all your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar, and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. Dustin's going to help me out. He's on the call, and he's going to help me with facilitating those questions that come up throughout the presentation. If we don't get to all of our questions, we're happy to continue the discussion after the call, or we'll reach out with anyone that didn't get any of their questions answered. And be on the lookout for links to future webinars. We have one coming up in January on how to close your year financially in the system. So please sign up for that as well. For the topics for today's webinar, we're going to focus on the 1099 forms for US IRS reporting requirements, 1099 specifically, but there's a few different types of 1099s. The most common that we see needed within SAP Business One is your 1099 miscellaneous and the NEC for non-employee compensation. But we'll get into how to set up those tables for the 1099 table, the 1099 boxes, and I'll explain a little bit more about that when we get to the screens. How to set up your business partners, specifically vendors, so that their master data will be configured to track the 1099 expenses or income. You've got your 1099 opening balances and 1099 editing as part of all of that setup that we're going to talk about. Then we'll get into 1099 reports and 1099 forms, and then we'll leave some time at the end for some Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to switch now to SAP Business One. Oh. All right, so let's get into setting up 1099s in the system. There is a little bit of setup you have to do if you've never used it before. You have the ability to, even if you've been on SAP Business One for many years and have never used this feature, you can enable it to start any year that you want, the current year, or you can set it up so that for next year, you're tracking all the expenses and you can generate them out of the system next year. Okay, so the first thing is the setup table. So we're going to go to administration, setup, financials, 1099 table. When you open that up, you're going to get, these are the out-of-the-box forms that come with, this is the latest version of SAP Business One. You may have different ones depending on your version, but most of these should be there. The NEC was reintroduced in 2020, so if you have an old version of SAP Business One, that one might not be listed, but you can always add. You can always just create a new one, depending on what type of 1099 it is, and then you can configure any of the new forms as needed. Okay, so I'm not going to update that. I do want to show you that the box section of this is for each one of these forms. If you click on the row, I'm going to go with 1099 miscellaneous. That is the most common one. And you see all of these boxes that are listed here. This is in reference to, I'm going to bring over a form. So this one's the 1099, okay, 1099 miscellaneous. So all of these boxes that are within the actual forms these are IRS forms. So you can configure, and every year these things change. They might be changed year over year. So just be mindful of that when you're setting it up for the next year, that you're referencing the forms that are published by the IRS to make sure that you're listing all the appropriate boxes that are needed for the current year. So these are the boxes, the 1099 boxes, and you have numbering, you have the description, and here you can assign the minimums. So what is that for? That is for the IRS required minimum. So for example, if you were to put on the first line, $600 is the minimum, this means that once you set up the vendors, if you set them up for 1099 miscellaneous box 6 to track all of the income that you're paying them, then at that point it will track it but it won't generate a report or a form for them unless you've spent more than $600. So you can configure that to be your minimum threshold. That's the requirement from the IRS. And again, those things change every year. I recommend that you consult your either in-house accountant or outside accountant to make sure that you're in compliance with the latest. Next year, I hear they're going up to $2,000 minimums, but that can change. Right now, the minimum is 600 for the majority of these, but some of them, like royalties, I believe is 10, as low as 10. So making sure that you set and configure that to what the requirement is. And you can do that for every one of the forms. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that. And now that is part of the setup. I'm just going to save that. So we already talked about the 1099 table setup and the 1099 boxes. Again, you can reach that through the administration setup, financials, 1099 table, and then the 1099 boxes are just a hyperlink from the different rows for that to configure. Okay. Now we're going to go to business partner master data because this is important. Once you've set up all of your forms that you're going to need to produce, you're going to want to make sure that in business partner master data, you have set up your vendors. So business partner master data, if I go back to, I'm going to choose a little bit and look at. So in here, you have the, under the business partner master data, this is for vendors, your 1099 form and boxes. You don't have to configure this for every vendor. This depends if you're going to need to produce a report for them. I'm going to go through a couple here. So see, a few of these have been already configured to have a form and to generate the number in a specific box. Okay. Now we're going to go into 1099 opening balances. So if we go into the finance and we go into, that's under administration. Administration, system initialization, and opening balances. We're going to go to the 1099, expand this a little bit so you can see it better. We're going to go from administration, opening balances, 1099, opening balance. Okay, so let's say you've been on SAP a while, but you're just going to start your 1090, doing the 1099 forms in the system for let's say starting this year for 2025. Well, 2025 is already almost at the end. And in the previous screen, when we set up the business partner master data, when you assign 1099 form and 1099 box, it will start generating on AP transactions from that point forward. It's not going to go back automatically. You can either do it through editing or you can set up an opening balance for what their 1099 should be up until this point, and then any transaction beyond this point will be captured. Okay, I'm going to leave this wide open actually and just see what it looks like. So in here, it'll show you any of the opening balances and when those were posted. This is the demo system. So we might have done one last in 23 and a few in 24 and one in 25. But you can add, as long as you have configured a 1099 form and box on the business partner master, they will appear on this list. If they're not on this list and they need to be, you have to go into the business partner record, assign this on the accounting tab, the 1099 form and the 1099 box, and then it will, that vendor will appear on here, and then you can assign it an opening balance at that point. Okay. All right, so those are opening balances, and now we're going to go into the financial area for 1099 editing. This gives you a few options in the selection criteria. You can look at open invoices and credit memos, and invoices and credit memos not marked as submitted yet. So let's just run it wide open and open invoices. And here, this gives you the ability to change the form or the box for a particular vendor or invoice. You're going to have a default for the vendor for form and box, but there could be exceptions where you did something with the vendor where the 1099 box has to be changed to something else. And this gives you the ability to change specific transactions of invoices to a different box if that particular volume needs to go somewhere else. And again, this is something that you would consult with your accountant on to make sure that you have that correct. I'm going to go ahead and now select invoices that are not marked submitted. And now here, this gives you ability to change the quantity or the amount that's going against the 1099 form for individual transactions. Now, more than likely, you wouldn't have this exception, but you could potentially, let me see if I can find an invoice that has multiple lines. Okay, here's one. So you might decide this particular line, it's a reimbursement for meals. Maybe that's not something that you would put into their 1099 box. You can adjust that out of the number using this editing tool here. And you can just go to the individual transaction and reduce it by the amount that you need to reduce that particular transaction by. Okay, great. So we just went through all of the setup that's required to now generate your reports and your forms. So now we're going to go to financial reports, accounting, and the 1099, 1096 reports. Okay. So let's, this again has multiple options in your selection criteria. You can also, I didn't show you this on the previous editing screen, but all the selection criteria, here I selected all the 1099 forms. You can actually isolate it to just, oh, if I just want to run my 1099 miscellaneous first, you know, then you can just select that particular one, and then it will be just looking at those particular ones. You can isolate it to specific vendors, or you can run it wide open. So let me run it wide open. Let's say I just did this year. There's a lot of transactions, but I'm going to see. Okay, and just run it. Okay, so here's one. This would list out all of, you know, depending on your selection criteria, all the ones that fall into the list of vendors that have 1099 summaries. Okay. I'm going to run it a little bit wider date range just because I want you to see other options. And here you would see a list of all, it's just a summary report of all your vendors, all the forms that you have, based on the selection criteria. Obviously, I narrowed it down to just miscellaneous, so that's why I'm getting that back. If I wanted to run it wide open and see it all, I can do that as well. Oops. And now I'm going to select home. Run it wide open, and now I'm going to get some other things in here potentially. Here's one that's a different one. So we got NEC, which is the non-employee compensation, and we have the miscellaneous as well. And any other ones that you would have configured and had transactions against, you would see that in the summary report. Okay. You can also do the summary report. So we did it by vendor. That first option is looking at it by vendor. The second option is looking at it by form. So it is just going to give you the same data, but now it's going to group them to say, okay, these are all your 1099 miscellaneous forms. And it's by boxes. Okay. Let me go back to that report. And now, if you wanted to produce a form, the next thing is producing your forms, right? So after you have tracked, you have all the data that you need in the system, you've validated your summary reports for your vendors and everything looks correct. Now you can start to generate your forms. The options for printing the forms, you're going to see the format that comes up. It's a PLD format. It's customizable. So as the forms do change from year over year, you can move things around if they have to be formatted so that it fits the form, the IRS form. So I'm just going to now down to here. Okay. Like this. And okay. So I've selected 1099 forms and I'm going to now go to the print preview. And it's going to show me, if I had multiple, you'll see different pages. This is blank because it assumes you're going to print it on pre-printed forms that you can purchase from a supplier that for your 1099 form. So depending on the ones that you have to create, you can order those and then you can print it here. Now, if you needed to tweak this, because maybe you need to move the name up or the address down a little bit, just so that it fits it within the boxes on the form, you can do that through the editing tool. So if you go, I'm having trouble seeing the form at the top. Okay. So that's how you would go about printing it. If I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, but I'm going to do a one that has more transactions. So I'm going to do a different year just to show you the different transactions. And it's just going to do the same thing, but it's going to now when you go to the print preview and go to print it, now you see you have 4 pages because you have in your summary report, you have 4 vendors. So it's going to print the 4 forms for you. Okay. So it's really that simple. You have a few set of tables, and it's one of those things you do it once and you don't really have to think about it much after. And you know, recommend that you always work with your accountant, either in-house or outside, to make sure that you're within compliance of IRS rules. But this is a way that as soon as you're creating transactions that are AP transactions, and I'm going to show you what that looks like on the invoice. So if you had selected a vendor and had set up their business partner master data with the specific 1099 form and box, every AP invoice you create for that vendor, it will track it, that spend to that form and box totals. Again, you have the editing option. If you need to tweak some things around, you can always do that. But this is at the header level, and it's using the default that's on the business partner master. If you do not configure the business partner for this, then it's not going to track that spend. All right. With that, I have concluded the presentation, but I do want to mention a couple of things. So in the invite for this, to register for this demo or training webinar, there was a couple questions. Is SAP Business One set up to track 1099s? Well, I went through the list of screens that you have to configure to make sure that your system is tracking the 1099s per vendor as needed. The functionality is already there. You don't have to buy anything else to get that configured if you don't already have it configured. And it's simple to configure. So you can always look back at this and work through it. If for whatever reason you would like support, just submit a support ticket to our b1support@phoenixteam.com email, and one of our consultants would be happy to help you. The other question was, are the vendors that need a 1099 set up properly? Well, we went through the business partner master data, and it's as simple as those two boxes on the accounting tab. You just have to configure, decide which vendors need it, which is the right form for that vendor. For example, you might have a vendor that's a subcontractor, and it's, Joe Smith, and he does some work for you, but he's an independent contractor. You would configure all of his activity to go to the 1099 NEC because he's a non-employee contractor. And then you would select the box that's needed for that particular vendor. And it's just really that simple, just in making sure that your business partner master is set up correctly with those two boxes. And then what if you need to edit the data for the vendors 1099? Let's say you run the summary report and you're like, that doesn't look right. Your accountant gave you different numbers. And then you isolate, oh, I need to fix these. And then that's where you can edit it. So it gives you the option of editing it so you can get the right numbers on the 1099 form. And then how you print it is as simple as running the form report, running the 1099 report, selecting form, and for the type of form that you want to print, and then doing print preview and then print. It's that simple. If you do need help with configuring the actual form because maybe it's a little misaligned, it's, with the forms that you have to print against, and you're not sure how to do that, you can submit a ticket as well for that. All right, with that, I want to do a quick stop here and see if there are any questions from those that are here. Justin?
Yep. And anyone even just now, you can feel free to put any questions in the Q&A below. Have one here, Maggie, from earlier. It was asking, we have a few vendors that were set up halfway through the year. If we didn't check the 1099 eligible box at the start, will Business One still capture those previous payments, or do we have to manually adjust them?
So it doesn't go back to capture against those AP transactions, but that's why it gives you the opening balance. So you can for 2025, you can run a quick report of all the transactions you've had against the vendor, and you can just create an opening balance for them of all the 1099 activity that you've done to date at the time that you set them up. And then from that point forward, once you've configured them, from that point forward, you will it will capture on every transaction appropriately. Yeah, it doesn't go back because of this because of the AP invoice, the way that this is tracked is on the individual transactions. This is blank and was previous transactions. So that's why it gives you the option to do the opening balance.
Got it. Good question.
Yeah.
Another question here. What happens if a vendor changes their tax ID halfway through the year? And how does that impact the 1099 generation process?
That's a great question. My first inclination is that you would have to have a separate vendor set up for the new tax ID to be able to generate two separate, because you're going to need to probably, I'm assuming, and this is a question for your accountant, if they change their ID, but a portion of the year is they have to have it reported against the original tax ID, and then the rest of the, the year they have to be against the new ID, then I think the cleanest way to have a new vendor set up with the new tax ID, and then you can keep those separate very easily. If it's a matter of they switch their tax ID, but all of the whole year can get reported against the same vendor ID, then I don't think you'll have to do anything but update their ID. And that's under the business partner master. So I think it depends on whether a portion of the year has to be reported under one tax ID, and then the other part of the year has to be under a different ID. Because you see this federal tax ID on the vendor side is just one field. If you have two separate ones for the same vendor in the same year, it would likely be the best option would have to be a separate vendor ID. I hope that answered the question.
Got it. I think I have one more question here, was just that does Business One automatically know when to not generate a form if the vendor is paid less than $600?
Yes, that's the whole. So that's why it allows you to configure, and where am I going here? If you go under the setup, 1099 table. Okay. That's the whole reason that this field exists. You select the minimums on here, and it will not generate if it's under that minimum. It will not generate a form. If let's say this particular line item, box 7, you had only paid a contractor $500 and the minimum requirement is $600. Now you have to fill this in manually to align with that current year's minimum requirement by the IRS. But if you have configured this, then when you generate the forms, it will not generate a form if they're under that total. So it's a great question.
Got it. That is all I am seeing for questions right now. Unless anyone else wants to ask anything. But like you had mentioned, Maggie, our contact info will also be in that slide deck we share with this recording. So if anyone has any other questions, you're also welcome to reach out to us directly.
Yeah, so let me just move that over here for a second. So just want to thank you all for attending today's session. Contact information for Dustin is here, his email address. On the first or second slide that had David, myself, and Brandon and Dustin, there's emails addresses there as well for each one of us. If it's a specific question about how do I do this in my current system, then by all means, you can just submit a support ticket to our b1support@phoenixteam.com email, and it will get assigned to a consultant to help you. If you have any other questions about maybe some of the other products that you saw on today's presentation, you can reach out to Dustin and he'll be in touch with you.
Absolutely. Thanks all.
All right. Thank you.